I'm muted right now, right?
Using the line to the microphone.
See, I can't on my account on Tony's.
Okay, you ready, Denise? Okay. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Appreciate everybody being here tonight with this meeting. I'll go ahead and start the meeting. We'd like to start the Morgan City RDA meeting. This is May 12th, 2020 at 5:30. The first on the agenda we have is to talk about and discuss the tentative budget. Ty, will turn time over to you to go through that budget.
Okay, Mayor, I'm showing that Eric doesn't have audio. Yeah.
Well, that might help them.
Okay, there it is. Now it's just muted, so.
I get texting. Okay, you got it?
All right, I'm on. Okay, thank you.
Okay, he's got it. Okay, so this is kind of a exciting year for the RDA as we work on the new budget because it includes the hotel incentive. The tentative budget just shows 125,000 for the increment money, and that is without the hotel. And that could be up to 130. The challenge is knowing if it's going to happen this year or not. So the 125 is just with the entities that are participating. If the hotel's completely finished and taxes are assessed and collected, that could add another 100 and up to another 130,000. If that happens, then the appropriation from beginning balance would just, we wouldn't need that amount. It would go down by 130. And so those two revenue sources would just offset each other. Hopefully that makes sense. And then on the big line items under business loans and grants, 370,000. So that includes 200,000 for the hotel incentive that's upfront. So their development costs, and then up to 130,000 for whatever's collected and assessed, and then another 40,000 for one additional commercial street project if we have one come through.
So Ty,
Yep.
so Morgan County, the school district, so what percentage of this RDA money are they willing to refund or rebate back to the hotel project, the motel project? Do we know
So
that?
right now, right now the budget's just based on the current agreement that we have. It's a 60-40 maintenance. So that's what this is based on. Once we set the tax rates, I'm planning on going back to each entity to see if they want to contribute more. So you can see that this budget's based on using pretty much the entire amount that the RDA has to offer to go towards the hotel project.
So this budget is reflecting that 60-40
Yep.
split, or
Yeah. Yep. And it's tentative, so there's still a lot of I want to spend some more time on it. The other thing it does is we're not doing the amended budget, but if you look at the amended line item, it includes a transfer from the general fund that would also allow for a couple of other additional projects if we want to keep keep that door open for other development on Commercial Street.
Go downstairs and watch a show.
So you had a question, David?
Yeah, so I think some of these are just going to be my newness, if you will, but the 370, we said 200 was a hotel incentive. You know, the description says business loan or grants. Is that either one of those?
Yeah, it's a grant. That's just the line, that's the title of the line item, but that's what we've used for our incentive.
Okay. And then that's funded from the up above the appropriation from the fund balance.
Yeah, yep. So there's carryover. So right now our fund balance is at 240,614, and that doesn't show on the budget. So the budget doesn't have the reconciled financial statements.
So
Go ahead.
the 250 is then basically a carryover.
Yep. Yep.
Gotcha.
So we're just saying that we would use what's currently, so we have, I'll just kind of run through the numbers. We have 240,000 in fund balance, but we also have 121,000 on outstanding. So we've approved 3 projects that are out there that haven't been reimbursed yet. So that leaves 115,000. And then in the current budget year, it's estimated that we'll collect another 125,000. So some of that's just a timing issue. But if we transfer 150,000 in the amended budget, then that would give us the 250,000. This is kind of hard to do remotely.
Yeah, I can see you writing on your paper there, explaining it.
So anyway, that 250,000 a beginning balance would be under that scenario if we transferred 150 from the general fund, because currently we're at 240, but after the 3 projects that we have going get reimbursed, and we have about 115,000 left.
The transfer from the general fund from last year, where does that money come from?
So that's also in the current general fund amended budget. So we may or may not do that. That's something we can talk about when we do the amended budget. So like I said, this is tentative. This is just a right now we have a surplus in the general fund, and we can decide what to do with that. It's technically not needed, but it does help with timing. So that 125,000 in the next year's budget won't come until February, March.
Mm-hmm.
And the 150, if we transfer it, would make it that beginning balance available and provide a cushion so that we could fund the hotel whenever that finishes, because that's probably going to be in the fall. And then make sure that we can sustain 2 or 3 other projects. If we don't transfer the 150, we'll be able to cover all of the hotel costs. We just won't be able to do any other grant opportunities if they come along, if that makes sense. And I just approached it this way to do the transfer, just to make sure that we could do 2 or 3 other projects if they come up, and also to provide a fund balance buffer that would allow us that timing gap to fund the hotel at the 200,000 level. So
Okay.
Well,
So-
so
Yep.
Ty, oh, sorry, Dave. So Ty, we would cover that $370,000 with $125,000 on the 2021 tentative budget. The $115,000 that would be left over from the carryover, and possibly some of the $150,000 in the general fund. That correct?
Yeah, yeah, so the appropriation of beginning balance, it doesn't actually come into play unless we need it. So that's just it's just an offsetting amount that if the revenue comes in from the hotel, then we don't need the appropriation of beginning balance. And that's just a way to balance the budget and provide the overlap of timing. So it takes care of all of the timing issues based on when it's collected versus when it's paid out. So currently we'll have $115,000, but we'll owe the hotel $200,000 if it's completed, say like in October. So we'll have a shortfall until the money comes in after the beginning of the year in the February, March.
Would we need to be really careful about granting any more money for RDA projects this year?
Not if we do the amended budget and transfer 150 from the general fund,
Mhm.
then we'll be just fine. Then the timing's not an issue anymore, if that makes sense.
Then just so I'm certain, the 150 we from last year, we have a surplus in the general fund, and this was just how we elect to use some of that surplus.
Yeah, it's in our current budget. So the one that's
Correct.
we're
yeah,
closing out in June. Yep.
current amended budget.
Yep.
I mean, we could elect to use the surplus for anything. We've just said we want to use it for RDA.
Yeah, it's just a strategy I built just to make sure that money, we can put it in capital improvement projects. It was just a thought that I had that we could keep that ball rolling in the RDA and fund other projects. We've got a couple of properties out front of the hotel that would probably be an attractive opportunity for somebody, and then the vacant property behind or to the east of the hotel.
And I can appreciate the timing nature of it too. I mean, that gives you some flexibility there.
Yeah, and then if, like I said, it's just a strategy because we also have the ability to transfer money from RDA back to general fund. So it just makes sure that fund is healthy and we don't have to worry about timing to accomplish the hotel plus 2 or 3 other projects if they come up. And if we want to wait and take it by a case scenario, we can. And like I said, that's where that appropriation from beginning balance just becomes a handy tool to, we either use part of it or none of it. But that's just how I created as a balanced budget in the tentative.
Thank you.
Got a question on budget? Got a question on the RDA budget? Okay. The motion, what we need to do is we need to set a date for final approval and accept the tentative budget. The final approval's got to be done by June 30th. Our last meeting in June will be June 23rd. You may want to set that date for final approval, June 23rd.
Is anybody else getting that feedback, or is it just the mayor's end?
Got it as well.
Yeah, we're probably all hearing it.
Did everybody hear
Is
that?
that better?
That's way, a little bit.
There's
So
two
it's always
computers in the
myself,
same
isn't
room.
it? Is everybody ready to make a motion? Have more questions?
So when would, you're saying we could make the final approval on June 23rd, correct? Is that the
Yes.
final?
That's correct. The date it's got to be done by is June 30th. If we set the date June 23rd, that would be a regular scheduled council meeting. If we don't do it, then we'll have to call a special meeting.
Mayor,
Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to make a motion that we, how do I put it? That we approve the final budget for the RDA on June 23rd, 2020. And we'll
And adopt, we need to adopt this, but we need to adopt it.
adopt the tentative budget. There we go.
So what's the motion, Eric, again, real quick?
That we set the date of June 23rd, 2020 to approve the tentative budget and adopt the tentative budget for the RDA for, is that what I need?
I think you'd want to consider it on the 23rd rather than approve it right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm meaning.
Yeah.
Let me clarify.
Thank you.
We need to approve the RDA tentative budget tonight. And then we need to set the date for final approval on the 23rd. So tonight what we're doing is we're saying adoption of the RDA tentative budget.
Then we should just try to do it in two motions.
Two-part
then.
motions, that makes sense. And Denise actually helped me understand one item first. Before we do that, we need to open this meeting to a public hearing before we make that motion, act on that motion. So I'll entertain a motion to open public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Tony, second by Eric, that we open the public hearing for the purpose of the RDA budget. There's no public here. Nobody came in to discuss that. So I'll entertain a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Tony, second by Eric, we close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimously. Okay, now I'll entertain a motion. Again, just to preface that motion, it needs to be two parts. Needs to adopt the RDA tentative budget 2020 for the 2021 fiscal year. And then we need to set dates for final approval, June 23rd. Eric, do you want to make that motion?
Yep, I'll try my best. I make a motion that we set the date of June 23rd, 2020 for the finalization and adopting the budget of the Morgan City, and that we tentatively approve the Morgan RDA 2020-2021 tentative budget.
Adopt the tentative budget.
Yep.
There's a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Eric, second by Tony. The motion then is that we set the date for the final approval of the 2020 budget, June 23rd, and then we adopt the RDA tentative budget for the 2020-21 fiscal year budget. Is there any discussion on that motion?
And close the public hearing, is that correct?
We did that. We voted on that, close that. Thank you though, Gary. Yeah, we did. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing since it, I'm gonna give a call. Let me go roll call votes so I can tell who's voting for sure. Tony,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Jeffrey,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
and Jeff. All right, Denise, can you unmute Jeff? Okay, Jeff,
Yeah, can you hear me now?
we can. Yep, we're good.
Hi,
Okay, thank you very much. Okay,
you're welcome.
motion passed unanimously. Okay, that concludes the RDA item on the budget. Any other questions on the RDA business that anybody wants to ask?
Just what we just adopted being tentative, does that, I guess that means that we can change that for before the final approval.
That is for sure correct. Yes, the budget we looked at tonight is a tentative budget, and that can be changed, all of the adopted changed up until the final.
So it'd be proposed. What about public input between now and then?
We held the public hearing tonight, and nobody's here to give input.
That would be the opportunity for the public then. Okay.
Any further questions?
Mayor, won't
Go ahead.
won't the final adoption also have a public hearing?
Yeah, that was my question.
Yes, yes, it will.
Does-
So they'll have, yes, public will have opportunity on the 23rd again, yes.
That'd be appropriate. It may have the tentative may be changed from today.
Okay. Further questions on the budget or on any RDA items? Okay, seeing none, I will call this meeting adjourned. And without leaving this meeting, we'll go ahead and move into the next meeting. We'll not need to change and go out and come back in again. So we'll change and go into the city council meeting. We'll start city council meeting off. Again, calls me to order. Appreciate you being here. Again, it is May 12th. I'd like to ask Jeff, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? And I'd like to ask Jeffrey if he'd give us the opening ceremony. So Jeff, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. You hear me? You hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag,
Flag.
the United States of America,
And
the republic for which it stands, one nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty
and justice
Justice
for
for
all.
all.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity we have to meet as a city council for Morgan City. And we're grateful for the community and the people in our community that we have to serve at this time. And we ask a blessing to be upon us as we plan for the next year and set budgets and get things rolling for the future, that we'll be able to have an open mind and be inspired and know the things that we need to do to continue to make this a great place to live. We're grateful for those that are serving to protect each one of us, and we're grateful for their service and ask a blessing to be upon them. Those that are dealing with this virus at this time, watch out and protect them and help each one of us and everyone in our community to stay safe. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jeff and Jeffrey. Appreciate that. Okay, on the consent agenda, there's one set of warrants that they were sent out. I'll entertain questions on the warrants or a motion.
I got one question, Ray. On page 1, the Bailey's phone and repair, is that any relation to Ty Bailey?
Yeah, yes, it is. So what that is my mom owns a cell phone store, and she sells jetpacks for internet. And when the COVID started happening, we set up a couple of home offices. We have 2 employees that didn't have adequate internet at home. So we bought the jetpacks and then paid for unlimited internet for 2 months that we can end at any time. So instead of going through the normal Verizon and having an account and setting up a contract, it was I bought those and I didn't have to go anywhere. It was on one of my trips to Idaho, but that is a relationship, and then it's a COVID eligible expense. So
Just so there's a, proper, is there any thing you need to do on your part to keep it independent and separate? Maybe just a recognition here. Could that be?
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
Appreciate you bringing that up, but the dollar amount, I don't think brings anything into play as far as
Okay.
shopping or anything. It's totally independent, so I don't get any kickbacks or anything like that. It was just timing was part of it, and then feasibility was the other part. So and then, like I said, there's no ongoing contractual agreement. We used to have a Verizon bill and account, and we got rid of that a couple of years ago. So as soon as we bring them back, we can just not pay for the service, and then we own the jetpack, so we can use them however the city needs to.
You may find employees, Ty, that don't want to come back.
The internet that we provided isn't that good.
Okay. Tell your mom to upgrade, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Mayor, I
Go ahead, Keith.
have one quick question. It's not really on so we no longer have a Morgan County News. So do we fulfill the requirements of open meetings just by posting it on our website? Is that sufficient? Does it have to be posted in a paper? Just a question, point of order, I guess.
So Denise, you want to answer that? But we also post it on our website, and then also on the public meeting notification website.
Utah.
Mhm.
You're on mute, Denise.
Yes, we put it on the public notice website, and then we post it on our city website. We also put it in a bulletin board at the city offices, and with the offices closed, I posted them on the outside of each of the doors. Then I posted one at the library and the post office and over at Ridley's.
That should cover it.
I hope so.
Is that sufficient, Gary? Do we meet the requirement?
Yeah, it is. There are some particular types of hearings that do require publication in a newspaper of general circulation. And so we're going to need to watch out for those. Some of the planning hearings and that type of thing do require that. We try to get rid of those because really when it comes down to it, the internet's the best way to advertise anyway. But there's still a couple of holdovers from years past and from newspapers who still would like to make a living.
So Gary, Morgan Moms is an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want the word to get out.
Once you start there, you just keep going and going. And,
Any other questions on the warrant or a motion?
I'd move to approve the warrants. Let's see, the register of 4/24 to 5/11/2020.
Is there
I'll
a
second that.
Who seconded it? Jeffrey? Okay, motion
Yes.
by David, second by Jeffrey, that we accept the warrants for the invoice registry for the date of 4/24/2020 through 5/11/2020. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. Again, we go by roll call, so we just want to Tony,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Jeffrey,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
and Jeff.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, motion passed unanimously. Okay, next item of business. Item number 2, there's not any public comments. We'll go to item number 3, which is resolution 2015, which amends the resolution 2007 to the waterline project.
Mayor, I need
I'll
to
take
recuse
that one.
myself for that.
Hey, Ray, I've got a couple of items before maybe getting into that. Just quick, I didn't see any minutes to approve.
They're not ready for tonight. So that's
Okay,
correct. They're not there yet.
so we'll just pick those up next meeting. And then
Correct.
on the notice of public hearing, I'd just throw this out for discussion. Can we require that face masks and social distancing be used? I mean, we call it requested, but I'm wondering if we could call it a requirement if they're coming into the meeting there.
Probably could.
Yeah, it may make sense.
Good input. Yeah, we probably could do that.
For next meeting, say.
Yeah, we could do that. Next public hearing. Okay, Ty, do you want to take that amending resolution 2007, resolution 2015?
Mayor,
Jeff,
I need to be excused for this next item.
hey, Gary, does he need to be excused or just to declare as a conflict? You're muted, Gary.
Gotta learn to unmute myself. It would be good if Jeff was taken offline. Can you take him and put him in a waiting room, Denise? Be able to do that? Yep.
Okay,
So there you go.
there you go, Ty.
Okay, so last meeting, we had a lengthy discussion about the changes to the original contract, and we approved two things. We approved the up to a dollar amount that Jamie had proposed based on his review of the contract, and then we also approved me to do change orders, but Jeff and Jamie got together and they were able to go through the entire contract line by line, and they did some going back and forth as far as what makes sense. And some of the things that we planned on doing on our own was better served to have Skyview Excavation do it at the same time that they were doing it. So they arrived at a new dollar amount. And so this is amending the original resolution that we adopted last meeting. I was glad that we adopted that because it allowed Jeff to secure the pricing that he needed to. So it gave him the go ahead on the materials he needed to order. And then we worked through a process to come to terms on what was most feasible and up the dollar amount, but it's still well below what the original bid award was. Our engineer firm reviewed everything and they're in agreement as well. I did a change order to the contract, and so this would essentially be the same thing that we approved with minor changes in the line items. I know some of our hesitancy last time was to be fair to the contractor, which we've done, and so this just brings it back to us, but it did allow him to secure the supply contracts that he had in place, and we're ready to move forward now. So,
Any questions from the council or input thoughts?
Mayor,
Tony,
so help me understand this. So if we pass this amended resolution, that it changes the dollar figure. Is that correct? Yes, no?
yes, that's
Yep.
what we'll do. It will
So
not,
does it go to this 746, 233? Or
yes, Then our
Right.
last motion, last meeting, we approved up to the 702 to 833. We then said Jamie and Jeff get together and see what makes most sense. As Ty kind of said, we were kind of hesitant to do it, so we want to table it. We wanted to be able to allow Jeff leeway to do what made sense for the company. And that's what this does, as go give and take. What it does, if you look at that last page, realistically, that gives you the grand totals. Basically, the city will be performing 97,200 of that full project, and Skyville will be a complete 746,233 of that project. So that's the total of the 843. So you can cut it 2 or 3 different ways. One way to look at that is the city is going to do $97,000 worth of that project. And we're going to have the contractor do the other 746,000 of that $843 project. I'll help clarify it or not. And then those pages of that spreadsheet throughout show the various items that they've agreed that Jeff thought the city could do and not be in his road as far as his ability to complete the project in a timely manner, and left those areas that the city could do in between, around, and after the contractor complete his work.
So the contractor's fully on board with this.
I have not asked him. That's what I asked Jamie today, and Jamie said yes. I said yes, I have not asked Jeff.
Ty, as you look at it, does the city have the ability to do the work that we've been at, that we will share?
Yeah, and it's a better fit overall. And after they sat down and met, then Jamie's comfortable with where we ended up.
Okay.
So,
You know, last discussion, we talked about different sources of funding. What will fund our 97,000?
so that's a Star in-house.
In kind, that'll be our own labor, our own in kind employees will do that. So we
Yeah, and
mostly
then
salary anyway, so it's not an additional cost to our department to have our employees perform that work.
Okay, I mean, even one of our options we considered was borrowing from, say, the electrical fund. I'm glad to hear we're not doing that.
well, so our portion, the 90 something is covered under our current operating budget. What's not funded is the part that the contractor, the 740,000.
Right.
And so, yeah, so we still need to, that is one of the options. And it's what I'm proposing is to loan 250,000. But we're still looking at our fund balance and what's available, but I think we still need to do a loan to cover the contracted amount, if that makes sense.
When will we decide or know that?
Between now and the final budget. So now that we have this contract in place, then that's something I'll be working on, and we'll probably go through the process between now and the final budget to get that adopted. So it's part of the new budget amount is the payback. So anyway, we can, there's a couple of options. One, we can use capital improvement monies. We could do a general fund transfer, or we could loan the money from the power department, which I think is the most appropriate because it leaves all of the costs for the water system with the water system. It should pay for itself moving forward and not be subsidized by tax money.
So that sounds like a discussion for a future time then, another day.
Mhm.
Okay.
You indicated that the items that that the city would be performing are separate enough from what Skyview would be performing. They would, I think you said that they were to do with laterals. Is that still correct? So they'll be doing separate projects. It'll be like two different projects, but
Yeah, and they worked through that line by line, and so we separated it.
Okay.
And so that some of the laterals were included in the contractor's amount. That's why it went up, because while they're doing it, it makes sense for them to just install so that the city crew isn't hindering any timing or anything else. And so we were able to get a little bit more separation with the talking to the contractor about how this would actually play out in the, as they did the project, so we could work independent of the contractor.
good.
Mayor, Mayor,
Tony,
oh, there you go. I will make a motion to approve, adopt resolution 20-15. It's amending resolution 20-07, which authorized an agreement with Skyview Excavation and Grading Incorporated for the 2020 water line project in a not to exceed amount of $702,833, authorizing further negotiations and change orders necessary for the completion of the 2020 water line project.
is there a second?
I'll second. Dave?
A motion by Tony, second by David, we adopt resolution 20-15, which amends resolution 2007, which authorized an agreement with Skyview Excavation and Grading Incorporated for the 2020 water projects and not to exceed amount of $702,833, authorizing further negotiations with change orders necessary for the completion of the 2020 water line project. As you look at that resolution, the new numbers are specified in that resolution on the second page.
Did I need to include them in the motion, Mayor?
That attachment is part of it. You can include it if you want to. I know it's not essential since it's attached to and part of that resolution.
I was going to ask that question actually, because later down, wasn't it for a little bit more than that? The amount that we're going to be paying?
The 702
On the
is
change order part?
702 was what we adopted last time in that previous 2007.
Okay, that's
This
where that number
changes-
comes from.
This would
Okay.
change, yeah, this would change that amount from 2007 to 2015. And you could include that amount, Tony, if you wanted, or note it's referenced by the resolution.
I just thought where it said further negotiations and change orders necessary for the completion of the 2020 water line project would cover that.
That's fine, because it is attached currently.
Mhm.
Gary?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay,
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because
appreciate that.
we're going to be a little bit more than that 702, correct?
Mhm.
Right, we'll be at the new, you look at your second
740.
page in there,
Right.
it's gonna be at the 746,233.
Okay. I'm
That's
good with
where
it
we'll be.
then. I'm good with it then. I'm just saying, I just wanted maybe clarification if we needed that, but if it's
Appreciate the
attached on there, I'm
question.
fine with that.
Appreciate the question. Further discussion or question? Got a statement? I'm sorry.
Looks like we're also extending the time to complete it. The contractor feels he can finish by August 31st.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what's put on this change order. That was in the documentation, yes.
Yep.
Okay. I'm good with that too,
Refresh my memory. Who seconded Tony's motion?
Dave.
Okay,
Dave.
thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing no proceed to vote, you will go by roll call. Tony,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Jeffrey, I see your lips moved, you're muted, okay. Eric,
Aye.
okay, motion passed unanimously. Okay, appreciate that. Denise, will you bring Jeff back in the meeting? Okay, next item is, again, adoption of the tentative budget for the 2021 fiscal year. That's the current budget. That's the budget for next year. We're going to adopt the tentative tonight. The one you see in front of you is the tentative budget for next year. And we also need to set a date for the final approval. And that date can be, like the last meeting, that date can be June 23rd. Okay. Before we discuss that, let's take care of the public hearing. We need to have a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Eric? We got Eric or David?
David.
Okay. Motion by Tony, second by David. We open a public hearing for the purpose of discussion on the tentative budget for Morgan City. Is there any discussion motion? We need to vote on that motion. All in favor of opening the public hearing? Tony?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Jeffrey?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
And Jeff?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion passed unanimously. Okay, we have not had any public join us at this meeting. It's opened and we have, so that those of you who are aware, Denise has set up in the middle of the room a computer and set up a microphone where if we had some public that did wish to come, they would have a computer they could log into and a microphone. Nobody's here at this point, so I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion to close public hearing by Jeffrey, second by Tony. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll proceed to vote then. Tony?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Jeffrey?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
And Jeff?
Aye.
Okay, motion passed unanimously. The public hearing has been closed. Now we'll turn to the tentative budget. Ty, would you take that and discuss those portions to us? If you have questions as we go along, please ask. Again, this document is tentative. Hopefully tonight we pass that tentative budget. The concept is between now and May 23rd, we can make changes to that, give Ty suggestions, passing information on that. It's a living document, be changed for final adoption on June 23rd. Okay, Ty, will you cover some of the points you want?
Sure, thanks, Mayor. And also just want to add the caveat that haven't spent as much time on the budget as I would have liked to because of the COVID-19 situation, and a lot of the financial information for the impact is yet to come. We're just barely getting the tax information from March. We got the tax information in March was the first. We haven't received it, but we did get word on what our amount would be, and that was the first month of impact, and the numbers actually went up. Our sales tax was up compared to the same time last year, and so we're still a little unsure on how to project revenue. But and then, like the mayor said, if anybody would like to get more detail or come and visit me, I would really appreciate any feedback that you have. I did just get the tentative budget put together, and I do have a couple of things to go over that it accomplishes. And the other thing that we did last year that seemed to get good feedback from the council was, in my budget, I had 4 broad goals that the budget accomplished. And so if you have any goals in mind that you would like for this year, this would be a good time to kind of discuss those. So far, the big items are the general plan update, the Young Street Bridge project, and still working on our infrastructure goal from last year, as we did not, adopt any local option sales tax to help with our road funding. And then the last thing is not last thing, but one other priority is the water line project that we just initiated, and then also to expand our fiber network. So now that Utopia is totally built out, we can start to connect our substations and our pumps, our sewer, our water systems all on fiber, so we can create an intranet and start managing all of our resources internally. And so those are just some of the major things that this budget does. The other thing is I've been paying attention, this funds the 5.8% healthcare increase that we went over a couple of meetings ago. And then I also propose a 1% cost of living. Currently, the CPI, or the consumer price index for 2020 is at 1.3%. And I propose that we keep the employee salaries at equal to what it costs for the cost of living, things such as food and living expenses and that sort of thing. So 1%. That said, neither one of those items will cause a budget increase this year, because I had a 10% buffer in each one of the salaries and salary line items, salaries and wages line item. I had a 10%. So funding the 1% cost of living doesn't actually cause a budget increase over last year. So just starting at the top, the proposed I'm on the general fund now. The proposed property taxes I left the same. I think we'll see an increase in property taxes, but it's also likely that we'll renegotiate the amount that we contribute to the RDA, and so all the new growth potentially would go to the RDA, and that's why the RDA goes from 120,000 to 125,000, if that makes sense. The sales tax, that one's very difficult to estimate on the tentative budget. I did a 20% decrease, or approximately 20%, but it's $150,000 reduction. I think we have really good indicators that we will rebound as a community. The hard part to estimate there is what the entire state, our portion of the entire state sales tax decrease will be, because a large part of Utah's economy is based on tourism, and we just have a population share of the entire pot, and so I think 20% is sufficient to cover that. And then the tentative budget includes 140,000 for sales tax and transportation, and that's only if that gets adopted. I won't go line item by line item, but under intergovernment revenue, we've already received the planning grant. That 100,000, we approved that at the last meeting, and so that will carry forward into the new budget year. Let's see.
Why?
Yep.
You see I noticed you have a pretty big decline on the fund interest down there.
So that fund interest, what happens is right now, if you can see, like, our actual year to date is 52,000.
Yes.
That's for our general fund. At the end of the year, the auditors do journal entries to divide it out equally between all of the other funds. And so if you look at the 2019, the actual ended up being about
Or the
after
general-
of the general fund's portion, and it's a difficult thing to estimate, and so I just left it. If we're looking at the same line item,
Yeah, 36,300 is the,
yeah, so budget wise, I just left it the same, and it's hard to know how that's gonna shake out. We did do a lot better on interest this year up till this point than we did last year. But that is also changing in a hurry, so
Big hurry.
I guess anyway, just the awareness, it looks like we have a lot more money in there than we do in the general fund, because that interest amount will get divided out proportionately to each entity.
so Ty, in that respect, that 15,000 you have on the tentative budget for that line item,
Mhm.
that's probably going to be way high, isn't it?
Yeah, it most likely it could be, and I can adjust that. One of the things that I do though is we track our revenue and our expenses as they come in. So even we approve a budget and then we stay below whatever it is that's coming in. And so on the revenue estimates, if it's high, if it's low, then we stay within the spending limits. So as I approve things, some of that's a timing, if we get into a really tight scenario on the spending side, then I might say, let's wait until, the property taxes come in, because that's a one-time payment of about, and so we just track that on a monthly basis, make sure we have the funds, and then we just need to reduce spending if we need to. But it's not a large dollar amount, even though 15,000 is a lot. Just as the budget goes, some of these will be high, some of them will be low. If that makes sense. Any other questions on the revenue, general fund revenue? That last one, contributions and transfers, the appropriation of general fund beginning balance, you can see that there's an amended budget, and that just also helps us reconcile the budget. Because we do need to spend down the fund balance. So far, we put that amount in, but you can see in previous years, we haven't actually used it. And that's just a budget strategy. And then the new one, I put 330 just in case we need it, because of the reduction in sales tax. So that helps us just create a tentative budget. We should be able to come in below budget, but if we don't, then we can use that portion of the fund balance, just to keep us on track. So it's kind of a safety net if you want to look at it that way. Expenditures, the travel and training, that one is a reduction. We still have to register for conferences. Most of our fall conferences have been canceled. And so that includes just spring conferences and registration. That's what most of the travel goes for, all of our office staff. Office supplies and expenses, that went up a little bit. A lot of that is COVID related, and so we'll get reimbursed for our expenses. We bought laptops and printers, and like the internet expense that was on there. We've ordered masks, and right now we're also looking at doing a plexiglass divider on our main counter, so that we don't have to, if somebody comes into the office without a mask, then we can still do business with them and keep them separate from our employees. One of the other increases you'll see on employee recognition is that 15,000. So we started that new incentive program that's up to $1,000 for each employee. That normally gets paid out of our payroll, and I separated that out and put it so it would be paid out of the recognition size, just so it's a little bit more visible. The annual amount that we used to pay out just came straight out of payroll, and I think that this will be a little easier to look at and understand how well that incentive program's funded and how it's being used. The other one under community and economic development, public and publications and ordinances is where the planning grant is. At the last meeting when I talked about getting the 100,000, Jeffrey had asked if that's going to be enough, and I'm glad he asked me that, because I thought about it a little bit more, and there's potential that we're going to have add-ons and more that we want out of that. Well, we have the contractor in place, and so I budgeted for 160,000 just to make sure that the money is adequate to get as much out of that contract that we can. The economic development line item went up by $10,000. 20 of that we still pay to the chamber on an annual basis, and then it's an additional amount because of the caboose and work on the depot that I'm not exactly sure, but we will have, I estimate about $10,000 of our own cost to have that donation. And so that's where that resides. There's a, let's see, I mentioned the general plan.
Hey, Ty, while you're right
General-
there, on the community and economic development, on your event expenses, I noticed you got some in there. I don't have a problem with that, but it seems like the chamber's been doing a great job of putting on the events. And I think a few years ago, we used to have that line item in our budget because we were trying to take care and do that. Do you feel it still needs to be where it's at, or can we drop that back a little bit? Just a thought I had as I was reading through this earlier.
Yeah, so they run the events, but we still contribute to
Okay.
each event independently. So what we do is we pay for the kids' games. It helps with the, our portion of the event. So we don't abandon the chamber completely. But the other thing is we also support a car show, and the idea is just to have money there that we can still support other community events that might not be one of the 4 that the chamber does as well.
Wouldn't you expect some events to not go forward this season?
And so in the amended budget, it actually goes down to 5,000, and then for the tentative budget, it just goes back to the original amount we had last year. And if you look at 2019, our total was 6,000. And so depending on how active the community is and those type of things that we do, I don't suspect that we'll spend the entire $10,000. But what I've done is I've tried to create an environment where people that want to do community events, they get it organized, they get the people organized, around the table, like the car show. That takes very little staff time, and then we just support it financially. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for, is that communities will say, hey, let's make this a community event, and they'll do the volunteer, they'll provide the people, the organization, the planning, and that just leaves us a little bit of money there that we can support it without having to drive events. So kind of money well spent that way.
Silly question.
Okay.
Do we participate with the county on the election expenses? I mean, we don't have city elections this year, correct?
Yeah, we don't. And I've always just left that there. And you can see that we don't spend near that amount. I just hadn't gone through the process of every other year, making sure, because on the years that we do have a election, it's hard to know what our expenses are, but yeah, we do pay them to conduct the elections. And I don't know, Denise, if you have any more input on election expenses. But this year we could definitely reduce that because this budget year, won't until but relatively low dollar amount. So it just helps a little bit more buffer in the overall budget.
Hey, Ty, I've got a question on the next page. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead of you.
Oh, go ahead.
On the law enforcement, the fire department, looks like you had to bump that up a little bit. Did the county bump up well, maybe not the law enforcement. I read that wrong. Excuse me.
Yeah, the fire. So
The fire.
they've proposed, so we don't have an agreement yet, but they've proposed a 30% increase on the fire, animal control, fire, animal control, law enforcement, and EMS. And I'm leaning towards only the fire and animal control, and that's why there's a small amount. It's a 30% increase, but it's also one of our lower dollar amount contracts.
Okay.
One of the things I'd like to do if we do come to terms with the county is make sure that the money that we give is dedicated to building maintenance. We own that building, and for whatever reason, back and forth, it hasn't been maintained. It had roof leak for a long time. Boyd's doing a really good job of taking care of the building, but I'd like to make sure that, what we do pay.
Put some stipulations with the money then.
Yeah, and we're trying to tie it down to what impact it's actually because of city residents, and so the building, the supplies and stuff like that go towards our ISO rating, which reduces the city's, every person's hazard insurance on their homes. And so if we can support maintaining a certain level, then it's worth it to us to reduce our insurance, where if you live in Croydon or somewhere, you pay more in insurance because of your proximity to the fire department and not having so there's some advantages there. But the other way I looked at that is with those two increases, this year we won't pay the $13,000 in recreation, and so we're still $6,000 ahead if we funded both of those 30% increases. I don't think we need to pay more for the law enforcement contract, and I don't think we need to pay for EMS because EMS should be paying for it itself, because they do bill for medical runs and that sort of thing. So, but great question. Yeah, they've proposed that. They've talked about it. They let us know that they want a 30% increase in all the categories, and those are just the two that I'm kind of feeling more comfortable about than the others. And animal control, we do use the animal control officer quite a bit, and the cost of having our own part-time service on either one of those is pretty difficult to do for the amount that we have budgeted there. So
I would really be opposed to just giving a 30% increase on law enforcement. I mean, that was a battle that we fought long and hard for a lot of years. And that $132,949 is supposed to represent one sworn officer to Morgan City.
Yeah, and it does.
That's the only way I can define how we have enhanced law enforcement in the city, is to know that we actually hire one officer. So for them to come and say we want a 30% increase on law enforcement, I would be adamantly opposed to that. Unless they could show a dollar figure that says this is not what it costs for one deputy.
Yeah, and I agree. They're also staffing an officer in Mountain Green and different areas, and some of that is just based on where the people are. where the traffic is. But we do have a dedicated car. I've talked to the officers, and I like to walk by and say, who's our city car right now? And they'll say, oh, it's so-and-so. And they do stay right in the city. And they're on a couple, like a 3-month rotation. So they're the city car for 3 months. And then I have used them for things. So like when we do snow plowing and cars are on the street, we know we have a city car. And so that's kind of I agree with your sentiment, though. We shouldn't just arbitrarily just
Roll
pay
30
more.
Yeah,
And that's why I felt more comfortable on the fire and the animal control
Right.
than the law enforcement one. But we are getting the services. So like when we had the transfer station under COVID and we were wondering where people were coming from, I called and they did have the city car run plates on the people going in and out of the transfer station. And so we're getting that relationship figured out where I know it's like, well, we have a city car. I know I can ask them to do this, or I could ask them to do that. I've had them go check on a couple of things in neighborhoods. And so it's just a matter, I think, of us using that resource maybe more to have that comfort level of what it is that we're paying for. Let's see, any other questions? I think we could I covered kind of the highlights other than the transfers, which I can get to.
Hey, Ty, I've got one more question.
Okay.
On the Class B and C expenses in there, did you add in the, oh, my mind just went blank, the extra tax we're going to try to do here in the future?
No, so that one's contingent. So if we get it, then we would also amend the road expenditure.
Okay.
So it's in there, but I haven't obligated. On the expense side, I really hesitate to put it in the budget until I actually know that it's there, because this is what each one of the departments runs off of.
Right.
Right.
talking
And
about
so,
talking about
so if you look, on the tentative budget, the Class B and C is back. Just this year, we spent $215,000 on our road maintenance budget. The dollar amount for the amended budget went up a little bit because we had some additional work that we had done. We added some sumps and some curb gutter sidewalk, and then next, the tentative budget goes back to just the baseline of where we're at, just the 220.
Okay. Just wanted clarification on that.
So
Yeah,
Eric, are you talking about that 0.25% tax?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. My mind kind of went blank there, Not that I know why we've kind of kicked that can down the road, which we understand, but
Yeah, so I haven't put it into the actual operating budget until we know that it's been adopted.
okay.
Ty, I have a question. And I
Yep.
don't know if you was gonna go through the enterprise funds or not. But I was
Yeah.
just gonna ask the question of you, is there any increases in any of the enterprise funds in this budget? Any
Yeah,
rate
so
increases?
the rate increases is a separate process than the budget, but the water one is the big increase this year, that water project for, the water line project. So the tentative budget shows that $750,000, but, and 300,000 in the amended. It won't be the 750 in next year's budget because a lot of the project's gonna get done in this current year. I just don't know how much of it's gonna get done before July 1st and how much of it's gonna get done after July 1st. And so, go ahead.
But there's no proposed rate. I mean,
Not
we're
at this point.
not proposing a rate increase on any of the enterprise funds. Okay.
No, not at this point. We just went through that process. The sewer fund is doing really well. Now that the loan requirement, the offset has been funded, we're up by $81,000. So the fund balance in sewers, 575,000, but most of that is restricted because of the bond. You know, that we had to have a set aside for that bond payment. And most of that has all been funded. We are in the sewer project looking to do new diffusers this year. That's for aeration, and so they would go under in the sewer lagoons and just bubble up instead of running the aerators that we have on top. We have 6 of them running, and they're a constant battle to keep them running, and they're not as effective because they only aerate the top of the water. So that is a project we're looking at, the next step on the sewer fund. The power department, we're ordering new equipment. We're trying to get new bucket trucks, and that's already been budgeted for. It's just a matter of when we can get them ordered and shipped here. So there's 300,000 in equipment that we had in the previous year's budget. We just didn't spend it because we couldn't get the trucks ordered. It takes a long time to get them ordered. Talked about the water fund. The water fund's the biggest concern, I think, on as far as rates, just because it's not keeping up with some of the replacement things that we have going on. But at this point, I don't have a rate increase proposed. Just the water fund, just so you know, the water fund, we have a fund balance of $527,000. I'm waiting just to see how this next month comes in, so that it'll cover the water line replacement project. We'll be short about $250,000. So that's how much we would have to borrow from the electric fund. So it's not terrible. It would be about $26,000 payment. Which we could work into the current year's budget. It's just if we do anything else or have something break, then we're going to be looking at a rate increase. Water fund. Oh, and then the sanitation fund. That's probably a good one to look at since we did that rate increase last year. Let me see what page that is.
13.
Okay, thanks, Tony. So it's starting to pull its own weight. You can go through the budget. One of the interesting things is if you look at the very last line item, appropriation of beginning balance. Our original budget this year at the beginning of the year was 18,400 that we needed to make up in the difference. The amended budget, I proposed 9,300, and then the proposed budget for next year is only 700,000. So, or $700. We don't need to use the 700, but that's just what it shows to make a balanced budget. So we're really close to just a break-even scenario. So it's trending in a positive direction. Then any more questions on the general fund before I go to capital improvements, because that'll be the.
I've got multiple questions, but in as much as this is a tentative budget, and rather than take everybody's time, maybe I'd like to just get with you one-on-one and go over them.
Okay. Yeah, we can sit down and go line item by line item if you're curious about, what gets spent where. The mayor and I do the same thing after the tentative budget, then he'll come and sit down with me. And so,
okay.
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Yeah, that probably makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. One of the things just on the general fund is there's probably more on the amended, more to talk about when we amend the budget than next year's tentative budget. So dealing with this year's current budget, there's a couple of transfers, one to capital projects to help with the bridge. And then, like I proposed, the transfer to the RDA of 150,000. We're coming into kind of a disruptive time to finish out this year, but we've also done a really good job on this year's budget. So we have a fund balance that needs to be drawn down. I don't know if anybody's been reviewing the financial statements that come from the Childs and Associates, but they keep recommending more, that we're outside of that 25%, which is really good for us because it means that we have a fund balance that we can put into capital improvement projects and save up for other things. One of the things I would like to talk about is the capital improvement project budget for this next year. That is not a real dollar amount, just to be honest. That's the entire bridge project. $3.8 million is the total proposal, the proposed budget. I'm still working with UDOT to understand what our portion is, whether we're going to have a portion of that or only the 6.77% match, which is $260,000. That 3.8 included the bridge and the road improvements. To tie it all together, that's the complete package. And so I'm trying to get clarification from UDOT on how much of that they're going to accomplish and how much of it the city would be responsible for. But I put it on there just so I could represent that project is ready to go. The other thing I found out from them is that we have 382,000 that's available now, so we can start engineering. I've talked to UDOT about that process, and in June they go through a process where they vet the qualified engineering firms that we can use. And so once they get that list together, then we'll ask for proposals. They'll submit proposals and then we can get started on it right away. But there's funding available of that 3.8 million. 382,000 is available between now and October 1st. And then after October 1st, then 3.425 million is available to actually build the rest of the project. So I know that that's not a lot of details, other than it is exciting that I've found out that we can get started with the design portion earlier than I anticipated. And so that's where those amounts, you can see those amounts are broken out on the miscellaneous expenses, the 382 and then the 3.425. So that will change. That I just wanted to get that in the budget so that you were aware of the total project from the capital improvement.
That's some great news, Ty.
Okay, any other questions on that? It's
Ty,
yeah.
the 700 East was just 7% on that grant, UDOT grant.
Yeah. So there's just when we applied for the grant, we were told that it was funded and we got the year, but the dollar amount in the beginning we were told was $2 million. And now UDOT's looking at it saying, well, the whole thing's funded at 3.8. And so what we're not sure about is if they're going to fund all of the other road improvements as well as the bridge, like the entire project that we proposed, or if we're going to be limited to just the bridge portion as far as what UDOT's cost share. And then, yeah, it's a 6.77% match. So hopefully the whole thing's funded and we just owe $260,000 that would be wonderful. I just can't commit to that. But we haven't signed any award documents. We haven't signed any obligation documents. So we're just kind of following UDOT's lead. And to be honest, this is my first time through that process. And so I'm kind of on my own learning curve, about being the applicant on that. So, but either way, we're moving forward. It's kind of the last 2 years I keep saying it. Yeah, it's 2 years out. Now we're here. So that kind of feels like progress, I guess. Covered the other funds. The one fund we didn't cover is the internal service fund. So that was something that we accomplished in last year's budget. If you remember, we created the internal service fund to fund our vehicles and our equipment. And so that's just something that's worth looking at. And on the vehicle sales, you can see we had budgeted for $18,000. That's what the value of the old vehicles, that's the dollar amount we placed on the value of it was 4 or 5 vehicles that we sold, and you can see that we brought in $41,000. And so that was a pleasant surprise, and that has really helped that fund get off to a really good start. We're on the expense side, we're under budget. So if you go down to vehicle purchases, we've spent $88,000 and we had budgeted for $128,000. And one of the reasons for that is our parks department decided to get a side-by-side instead of a truck, and they have a residual value on the side-by-side, but it has the gas cans and the trimmer holders for the trimmers and rakes, and is a lot more user-friendly for our seasonal staff to get around in the parks. And so we're a little ahead on the budget there. We have one more vehicle that's been purchased, but it hasn't come in yet. Everything got delayed on the but anyway, that fund is working well, and I'm working on a new policy for surplus, just to make sure that as we surplus, then it's according to our own policy. We don't have a surplus policy, and I'd like to get that done this year before the fall, so that when we sell the vehicles, that it's through an auction site, or taking them to the auction, or we run our own in-house auction. But it really needs to be according to a policy that we have on the books that we currently don't have. So we're working towards that. And I don't know if I have any other items. Are there any other questions on the tentative budget? Hopefully this gives you a lot of, food for thought, or something that you'd like to ask in the interim, or if there's a priority that you would like to know how we're going to accomplish that operationally. It doesn't necessarily have to be the budget. It can just say, hey, how are we funding this? Or, how does this department work? I'd really enjoy, going over that with any of you individually at any point. So it's a little rushed this year because we all went into our different directions. Normally I have a proposal from each department, and I'm still trying to go through, getting with each department to kind of fine tune it over the next over the next 1 month, because we only have 1 month, but I think we're in pretty good shape.
If any other questions on budget items or a motion?
I'd move to approve the adoption of the tentative budget 2020 to 2021. should we set a date for a final approval also?
Yeah, continue that out.
Yeah, and then we'll, I'd suggest or recommend or to move that we set the same June 23rd date for the consideration of the final approval of the budget.
Second,
Okay, motion by David, second by Tony. We adopt the tentative budget 2020 to 2021. And we also set date for final approval on June 23rd. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, so now we'll proceed to vote. Tony,
aye.
David,
Aye.
Jeffrey? Yes, I lips move. Eric
Aye.
and Jeff.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passed unanimously to adopt that budget. As Ty said earlier, if you have questions, thoughts, interests, please get in touch with him. The more varied thoughts and angles, the better off Ty can hone this. So please communicate with him if you have some thoughts or interest in it. Okay, any further updates from the council on anything you'd like to mention? And we'll turn over to Ty for some updates.
So just a quick Utopia update. We're just over 500 connections and still growing. So it's a continued success story. Then just a COVID update. Still attending the briefings. We do have one case currently in Morgan. We didn't have one for about a week and a half, and now we have a new case. Just an update. It's from a healthcare worker, so it's not from the community, any place in the community. It's an individual that works at a hospital and contracted it there, has very minor symptoms, but is quarantined as well as their entire family. One of the big discussion items is the relief package money. There's quite a bit of money available from the state. They haven't exactly decided how to divvy out the money. It will definitely cover all of the costs that we've incurred. But there's a lot of communities that are doing grants to their business community, loans, zero interest loans, and the state portion of the money is so there's 3 entities that got money on the CARES Act: Utah County, Salt Lake County, and the state of Utah. So the state of Utah is going through a process to divide out their money, their portion, to make it available to the business community. And that's really what it's intended for. And it's really narrowly focused to necessary expenditures on our own, or helping other businesses. The problem we have is we don't have a board, we don't have a process, we don't have anything already in place that some of the other communities have. We don't have any criteria, and we're not sure on what our current business need is. The chamber did a survey and they got about 50 responses from our local businesses that are through the chamber, and 70% of them, 77%, say they have been financially impacted, and about 12 to 15% of them have done layoffs. But we don't have much more information than that. So anyway, just want to make sure you're aware that conversation's going. Some communities have, like I said, zero interest loan options, but the research I've done is a lot of them already had loan programs in place to help small businesses. So they do it under their economic development departments, or they'll issue loans, and they've come up with different criteria. But there is talk, but it's just hard to put it together. So to see if we should be doing more. My sense is that there's very few businesses that are on the verge of closing their doors because of COVID here in Morgan. Some of them are doing actually better than they've ever done. We've had some good numbers in the grocery store, the hardware type stores, some of the restaurants, even the restaurants that have closed their dining room, have said that they've really felt a lot of community support with the takeout and those sort of options. And now we're at that point where we're starting to transition to opening more businesses up. So if you have any feedback or comments, if you think we should be doing more, if you want me to look more into how to help businesses, my big fear is being able to survive an audit on the back end, that whatever money was given out was necessary and appropriate. And I think just as a small city, it's maybe beyond our scope or our ability to create a meaningful and impactful type of program. I also worry about duplicating efforts. The PPP program is out there. Unemployment benefits are doing their thing. And so anyway, that's just a lot, just some thoughts that I've been having that I just like to make the council aware and maybe get your feedback if you don't mind.
Gary, just curious, how would Layton approach the same topic? Have you heard of maybe what they would be doing for businesses?
So I was talking to President Adams, I guess, yesterday on this, and Cameron from the league, and they're indicating that it'll probably come in 3 tranches. The first tranche will be according to population. Utah County received about 111 million, which is almost their budget again. And Salt Lake County received about 220 some million, which is about a quarter of their budget. And so, you know, those cities in those 2 counties probably will not receive anything out of the first 2 tranches. They'll have to negotiate with their counties for that money. But Ty's right. All of the cities right now are looking at probably very little when it comes to direct expenses of the COVID, except for Salt Lake and maybe Utah County and perhaps Summit. But what they're looking at more is how they can use that money to benefit their businesses. And so there are some guidelines that have come out from the federal government on how this can be used for, for business loans and business grants. And so it might be good to Ty's point, you're going to have to account for it if you give it out. And so it may be good to take a look at what some of those restrictions are to determine whether or not it's something we might want to do. And also take a look at how much our businesses really need that in Morgan. I'm not sure, if you were to go through those businesses, that you couldn't provide some help without it becoming too complicated. But it looks like about 1/3 is 246 million altogether coming out of the state. And so if that were divided proportionally into 3, it would mean that there would be roughly 3 $8 million tranches that would come out. The second tranche would be based on probably more on need, and they'd evaluate the needs of cities like Moab and St. George and the thriving metropolis of Monticello probably, and just to see what deficiencies there were as a result of, they've got a lot of problems with the revenues that they would have received from tourism and from recreation, that type of thing. They're looking at maybe that second tranche ought to address some of those issues in places like that, where literally 3/4 of their budget has just disappeared, as a result of the lack of tourism. But they're trying to do it carefully. I think that first tranche by population, I think Morgan has an opportunity there to just evaluate the businesses and determine what the needs are. And then I would take a look carefully at the federal guidelines for distributing those funds and see if you're able to do it without too much of a problem and with being able to track it effectively. Ty's right. When you're audited on those things, it's a pretty gruesome event. And so you want to make sure that whatever you do, you can track it.
So two of the parameters is we can't offset our revenue loss. So it has to be money that's spent directly or passed through directly to a business, and it has to be a necessary expense. So however you divide up that criteria, you have to evaluate that and make sure that it was actually a need, a needs-based thing, which is a little bit difficult for us to do. And then the other thing we can't do is, because this is something I thought about, is just doing some sort of a grant program where we would relieve if we offset any fees, help with utility expense, anything like that we actually have on our books, and we're not allowed to touch that money that way either. So we can't say, hey, apply and we'll give you utility assistance. We can't use it that way either. It has to be just passed through to the businesses. And so, when it first came out, and the other thing is the money that's given out, a lot of people are getting the understanding that the state's just pushing money out and we have all this money available and it's an up to amount, and it still needs to be tracked and be an appropriate use. But my first thoughts were, let's just keep it in line with something that we already do. So if it's utilities or something like your business license for the year, it's a small dollar amount, but just those sort of things. But that's not an eligible expense, and so that becomes another huge hurdle, I think, where it's.
Could money be used for, say, a furloughed employee for a payroll expense? That could be an easy one to identify.
Yeah, the key is a lot of them are not giving the money to those who have received the PPP funds, the Small Business Administration loans, because those are being forgiven up front for those very things. And so a lot of the needs have been addressed already. That's part of the issue.
No double dipping then.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh, Ty, do we have anybody, have we seen an increase in the city of some residents that are having trouble with utility bills and that type of thing?
We've just had a couple. We had one person that is self-employed, and so they don't qualify for unemployment. And he's a contractor, so his expenses are very difficult to separate because he works out of his home. So there's not like rent and your utilities, and claiming that on your taxes is one thing, but saying, hey, I need help here with my house payment makes it a little complicated. So I think that's more the category that we have, is maybe some home-based businesses and some maybe service-oriented people that have been impacted because they can't travel, or their suppliers are all shut down or whatnot. But as far as our brick and mortar, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Ty, I can't remember whether they allowed for any agricultural type uses, for example, where the production line is stopped and you've got agriculture products that are sitting there. I don't know, Morgan's got the dairy, I know, and a few other things like that. I don't know if those are a separate pool of money or whether they come out of this too.
So that's another, like you said, on the duplication of efforts. So there's so much already funded from the CARES Act that I think we don't understand, or I don't understand, right, as a city, because it funded a lot of different things. And that's one thing I worry about, is duplicating services. And I'm not sure what came through Department of Ag, or just as a general employer, what they're eligible for that way.
So I know on the ranching part, I was talking to, am I muted? I know I was talking to a rancher yesterday that's actually applying through the State Department of Ag for some loans through there, and that's kind of how they're doing it. And they were talking about the paperwork necessary to get that grant. Definitely be able to help keep them afloat through this, but that's all coming through the State Department of Ag. So as far as that, I think that's kind of to everybody's point is there's ways to get the money for people. I'm not 100% sure that we need to be double dipping out of two different pots for them. I'd say just moving forward, let's just be cautious. I'd hate to start divvying out money when somebody else, there's other avenues for them to get funds or grants or something besides us having to divvy it out, would be my caution.
Yeah, and I agree. I think if you already have a line of service, you already work with a business in a certain manner, that's where the funding should come from. The cities and the couple entities that are doing this, I think already have programs in place. So they have like a community and economic development department that do business loans, kind of like what our RDA does. So all they're doing is changing the parameters of something they already do. When they said before, I looked at Ogden's, for example, and Ogden's is a 0% interest loan, but before COVID, they did the same process where they would do capital loans for small businesses, and it was up to 18% interest, and they'd evaluated them on a case-by-case basis. So they already have their process in place. They already have the, fund set aside. They probably already coordinate with a bank or a financial institution for a lot of their evaluation criteria or that sort of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure I brought it up so that the council was aware that that's a lot of the discussion going out there. We haven't received anything at this point. I mean, it's hard because it would be nice to help. But at the same time, I think the expectation of a small city is what it is. And we're not the first place that people turn to get business going. It's, we're kind of in the background and making sure the roads work and their lights come on and their toilets flush. And when we're kind of the silent partner that way, other than the only thing we do have is the RDA. And I can't think of anything where this would apply in our RDA, as it's all for future development, not current impact on a building. So
Just tell them, Ty, we don't want to be greedy. Just give us 10 million. That'll be all right.
Sounds good. We do have, I would say that through the chamber, we had 5 businesses apply, and 3 of them got $5,000 from the Salt Lake Chamber. So the Salt Lake Chamber is already going through their own process working. The Salt Lake Chamber is considered the state chamber of commerce. And so our local Chamber of Commerce has just been helping get businesses to the resources. We've had a couple of them that were severely impacted, and they did get funding, $5,000 each from the Salt Lake Chamber. And so it's not that we're without help. It's just, I think our role has been providing information and getting businesses to the resources, that making them aware that there's resources available if they weren't currently aware. So anyway, I think that's all I have, Mayor, for
Okay.
updates, unless there's questions.
There are questions or updates from the council? Right. Eric shaking his head no. I see Jeffrey shaking his head no. Yeah, okay. Jeff?
Nope.
All right, looks like there's no, okay, anything else? Okay, if not, I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Okay,
Thank you.
be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
All right.
Have a good evening, everyone.
You too.